Welcome back to Boundless 2021. I'm very excited for this next session, and I hope you are too. A strong customer retention strategy is a critical component of a healthy business, especially in challenging times. When new customer acquisition screeches to a halt, your existing relationships can be key to breaking out of the slump. Mark Stoddard runs sales and marketing for ClientSuccess, the world's leading customer success growth platform. Prior to ClientSuccess, Mark founded and led both the Europe and Asia sales teams for HubSpot, growing those teams to be large contributors to the growth of the company. Mark is joining us for the next hour to show you how to create effective retention strategies for your business and how to use them to meet or exceed your revenue goals. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to welcome to the Boundless main stage, ClientSuccess VP of Sales, Mark Stoddard. Hello, Mark.
Kristen, how are you?
Doing
I'm so glad to be here. I'm pumped. I'm excited. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Yeah, take it away whenever you're ready.
All right, let me pull up my screen here. See, I need to share my slides. Let me go ahead. But just thank you to Kristen and Ben and the whole, Boundless Nutshell team. I've been so excited to be a part of this. This is such a cool event. I'm honored to take part, and especially honored to talk on a topic that's, so I'm just going to call it near and dear to my heart. I've spent, as Kristen said there, I've spent the last, 10, 15 years of my life focusing on how do we help companies grow? And that can be a combination of, sales, marketing, and of course, what we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about retention, growth, customer success. And so really excited. And if anybody wants to ask questions or you can find me anytime. I'm on Twitter at MD Stoddard, easy to reach out to, easy to interact with. But let's get into it. And so, Kristen, you gave a cool intro into, let's just call it ClientSuccess. And so just to give you a little bit of context on kind of who we are, our story, what we do, as you mentioned there, we're a customer success growth platform. And so what that means is we help customer success teams or recurring revenue kind of subscription teams to keep and grow their customer base, their install base. And so we're going to talk a lot more about that as we move on. But let me jump into kind of the agenda of what we're going to talk about. And so really the agenda, I'm going to focus on three areas. The first is I'm going to talk about the difference between repeat and recurring customers. And I'm not going to bury the lead here. I'm going to hopefully convince everybody on the call to move toward recurring subscription-based customers by the end of this hour. That's my big hope. And then once we get there, I'm going to talk about, why to build a customer success team and start to give you some early pointers on how to build a customer success team if that's not something that you've done quite yet. So let me just kind of start here by talking about the importance of customer retention. I think we've all heard a version of this stat at some point about how acquiring new customers is way more expensive than retaining existing ones. I had to laugh the other day. I saw this Harvard Business Review article, and they've even gotten to the point to where they're not even trying to put data behind these. The article itself said something to the effect of, depending on what article or depending on what study you believe or what industry you're in, it can be 5 to 25 times more expensive to get a new customer than to retain an existing one. And so I don't think anyone's going to kind of argue with the premise. If you would like to, I'd love to hear about it. Chat me, put it in the tweet. I'd love to debate that. But this becomes even more important when things like what happened to a lot of SMBs over the last 12 months. What happens when your new customer funnel effectively drops off a cliff? It depends on, depending on the industry, depending on your location. There were plenty of SMBs that saw, especially Q2 of last year, their new business drop, 25 to 60% declines. If you were unfortunate enough to be in something like the movie theater industry, I saw that they had, almost 99% declines year over year in new customers coming in the door. We were kind of all in this world where people just stopped buying new things, even if they were relatively unaffected. If you were in the B2B in any arena, good luck getting a CFO or a controller to approve any new purchases in the middle of last year, just because there was so many people that just were their consumption was dropping just out of abundance of caution. And so that makes it really hard when you're trying to grow your business based on new customers. And you think about it, I'll take a quick drink here. When this started to happen, the smart companies started to shift their approach. The smart companies started to think about, how do we focus a lot more on retention of our existing customers? How do we get more repeat customers in the door? Then trying to focus on, how do we get more net new customers in the door? Just because so many people had stopped a lot of their new purchases. And what this started to do is, as I said there, people are starting to focus much more on repeat customers. They know you, they're your biggest fans. And there's all sorts of benefits to working with quote unquote repeat customers. However, repeat customers also come with them some inherent risks. And I'm going to talk about two types of risk that repeat customers tend to introduce into a business. One is called, I'm going to call it stretching risk. The other is called, I'm going to call it switching risk. And so these will all resonate, I think, with a lot of you. But the idea here is that, stretching risk is the idea that I have a repeat customer. I have somebody who likes me, who knows me, but they're stretching the amount of time in between their purchases. I think about, like, if I were, a barber or a salon owner, I might have customers that come in once a month, and like clockwork, they've tended to come in once a month for a long time, and I've been able to build a nice business off of that. However, life gets busy, pandemics happen, stuff like that. All of a sudden, those people that were coming in once a month are now stretching to every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, every 12 weeks. So while I still have this nice book of repeat customers, they still like me. They still want to work with me. The problem is they've stretched out their purchases. And so all of a sudden my business just got cut in half, even though I'm still focused on my repeat customers. The other thing that can happen is just people switching their purchase. And this is the tougher one of the two. I think about, like, simple businesses like a car wash. I go to the car wash down at the end of the street quite frequently. But if I'm in another neighborhood, I'm in another part of town, and I need a car wash, it's pretty easy for me to switch my purchase to somebody else in a normal circumstance. However, these can end up being, major disruptions to a business unless you're smart enough to think about, how can I get customers onto a subscription? And that's where, really we're going to focus today. And what I want everyone to start to think about is, how do I evolve my repeat customers or my one-off customers and turn them into recurring or subscription customers? And what you might be saying is some things like, oh, my industry just doesn't work for subscriptions. It's never been, there's some industries that have been subscriptions for as long as any of us can remember. Utilities, your cable, when people still, got newspapers frequently, all of those things were tended to be on a subscription. And even if I do a digital subscription now to, whatever newspaper, that's still always on a subscription. We're used to that. But there's a lot of industries that have never kind of taken that jump, but are now really starting to go into that heavily. And let me just give you a couple examples. The first example was a clever program that I saw recently from Audi. Now, all of us, in a lot of cases, we've made car purchases. And typically, if you're like most buyers, that's a purchase that happens infrequently, every number of years, open to severe stretching risk. If I don't want to go through the battle of buying a new car this year, I can just drive this thing for another year, whatever. And switching risk, because since it happens so infrequently, I tend to look at all the competitors when it's time for me to make a new purchase. However, Audi, and actually they're not the only ones doing this. There's several other car makers that are starting to do this. They're starting to evolve into a subscription industry. So look at this new program called Audi Select. And in the Audi Select program, what I can do is, I've got a group of cars. I don't just have the one car I own. I now have a group of cars that I can choose from, maybe like 4, 5, 6 cars that I can choose from. And I have all these cool benefits that I can get by being a part of this program. I can swap those cars out twice a month. Say for 2 weeks, I know I'm going up in the mountains. I know I'm going skiing. I'm going to drive an SUV for these 2 weeks. And then once I get back, I'm going to swap that over to a sedan. And then, it's summer, so I want to drive a convertible, whatever. I can swap out the car twice a month. And I have all these other benefits. unlimited mileage. I don't have to worry about insurance or maintenance, no oil changes, no tire rotations, no any of that I need to worry about. 24/7 roadside assistance. I never have to worry about washing my car again because every time I swap it out, I get a full detail. So really cool program focused on trying to take some of those one-off buyers or those repeat buyers and move them toward subscription buyers. Here's another industry that really kind of caught me by surprise, and it's cosmetic procedures. I saw this cosmetic clinic, this aesthetics clinic here locally that this is an example. It's a Botox clinic, right? Typically an infrequent, maybe a repeat purchase, very open to stretching risk, maybe less open to switching risk. Maybe if I use this one, I'm really signed into them. But what this clinic is starting to do is they're offering this VIP bank program where even though I'm still only going to use their service periodically, maybe twice a year, every single month, I'm paying into they call it a bank program. And so basically what that allows me to do, simple enough, I'm paying into that bank program every month. That gives me discounted rates on other kind of priority benefits. So a really cool way to start to think about a subscription in a market that I wouldn't have thought about it 5 years ago. Maybe the last example here is, something clever that, Delta did with SKYMILES Select. This is a simple program. I think it's like $50 a month where I can pay a flat monthly rate. Regardless of how much I fly, I can always get priority boarding, free checked bags, some other benefits. And so this is another kind of clever way of industries who traditionally have not been subscriptions, traditionally not been recurring, starting to think more about this. And so why think about this? Why shift to subscriptions? What are the benefits to me? What are the benefits to my customers? And for me, the biggest benefit to you as a business owner is predictability. One of the hardest things in running a business is if you have to go figure out where you're going to get your revenue each and every month, that's a tough thing that happens when the first of the month rolls around and you're trying to figure out how do I go get new business? And so I've got some predictability. I've got some consistency in my cash flow. And then I've also started to eliminate that stretching risk. Those customers that could easily stretch out to, every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, every 10 weeks. Now they're kind of locked in. They're paying for it every month. And it starts to lessen that switching risk. Going back to the car wash example. If I need a car wash, I'm sitting in front of a car wash that is not the one I have a subscription at. My car wash is a mile or two away. I would gladly drive the extra mile or two over to mine. So there's less of a risk of me switching to the other business. Benefits to your customers. Again, they want predictability too. I will gladly pay the Amazon Prime membership every single month because I know my packages are all going to get here in 2 days. And all those other benefits of Amazon Video and all that, to me, those are just extra benefits. But I would gladly pay for just that predictability. And the other thing that you commonly see among all these programs, there's some premium benefit. There's some discounts. There's extra benefits. There's priority access. There's more convenience. So that's one of the things that you've got to think about if you're trying to think about how do I take my one-off customers and start to move them to recurring subscriptions. I've got to think about what's the program I buy them into. And there is just no shortage of other industries that are doing this. If you want to geek out on this, what I recommend you do, go pick up this book called The Automatic Customer by John Warlow. He talks about how you can create a subscription business in any industry. And he's got, a dozen more examples of B2B, B2C, all sorts of examples of, how you can start to switch. All right. So now we've got a recurring business. We've got a subscription business. Now I want to switch gears into kind of the next part of the presentation. So let's focus on, now that you have a recurring business, what's next? Running a recurring business is actually quite different than running a one-off or a repeat business. And one of the first three things that you really need to dig into is you need to understand three parts of your customers, their attributes, their economics, and their activities. So let me dig into each one of those. So the attributes. This is pretty straightforward. Probably a lot of overlap in the attributes with your best customers right now, your repeat customers. What are their demographics? What are the challenges that they face? Back to the Audi Select program. Audi probably has a really good core targeted persona here. They're probably targeting professionals that really value convenience, flexibility, and all the other things that that program affords. So those are the attributes that they're going after. And that's going to really drive how they market and how they attract those people into their business. The next thing I need to think about, though, is the economics. And the economics of a subscription business is very different than the economics of a more kind of traditional one-off business. You need to think about how much does it cost to acquire a customer. You need to think about how long do those customers stick around. And then you need to think about, do they tend to upsell, downsell during their relationship? By how much? What does that look like? So your cost to acquire, that's going to include things like your marketing, your sales, all your onboarding costs to get that customer up and running. And so again, back to the Audi example. Let's say it costs them, to use round numbers, say it costs them $10,000 to acquire a customer. Let's say they make $1,000 a month on the subscription. So for that example, it would take them 10 months just to break even on that account. So if I'm a user of that and I cancel after 6 months, they lost money on me. But if I stick around for 18, 24, 36 months, they could potentially make a lot of money off that. And so ideally, what they're trying to do is get somebody to start on a, low plan. Let's say they're $500, $700 a month. I don't know if these are their actual numbers. I'm just using round numbers. And then get somebody to start on a low plan and then get really excited about it and start to upgrade over time. That's where I'll get to in a minute, how you build a really interesting positive growth subscription business. So in addition to the economics, the next thing to think about are the activities. What are the actions? What are the things that make that customer retainable, especially early in the relationship? And so a former colleague of mine, Mark Roberge, now a professor at Harvard Business School, talks about this concept a lot with software companies, where he talks about something called a customer success leading indicator. And basically what we're saying there is, what are those things that a customer does early in the relationship that I can easily monitor that make them sticky, that make them stick around for a long time? So to use software examples, he talks a lot about how companies like Slack, a lot of us are familiar with Slack. And one of the things that Slack monitors early on with new customers is they want new customers getting in, using their platform to send messages, and they want to hit a certain threshold. They want a certain amount of messages to be sent in the first month, because if we can hit that threshold, they know that we're adopted into that business and we're going to be fairly sticky. Dropbox is another good example. One of the things that they'll focus on is, if you're familiar with Dropbox, it's a file sharing platform. And so what they'll focus on is things like, if I can get a new customer to save a file on my laptop and then get them to sync that across multiple devices, if I can get that activity to happen in the first 30 days, chances are that customer is going to be very, very sticky. And so those are software examples. But if you're not in the software game, there have to be plenty of examples that you can think about of the activities or the actions a customer would take early on in that relationship that would make them sticky. I assume that if I'm the program manager of Audi Select and I get a new customer who tries out the program and they don't do a car swap within the first couple months, they're probably missing on a key benefit to the program. And that's probably an at-risk activity. So I want to focus on, how do I get customers to take those actions, those activities that are going to really drive long-term success. So again, attributes, economics, activities. So, and we can spend a whole, 6 more hours on those 3 things. But for sake of time, I want to move on to, a couple of the things before we round things out. So once I understand attributes, economics, and activities, now I need to start thinking about, how do I evolve my business? And this is what, most subscription business organizations start to look like. Everything on the left side of this slide, everyone's familiar with. You've got product, you've got support, you've got finance, you've got your executives, you got your marketing team, your sales team, etc. But now we're going to start building this function, and I'm going to call it a function because it could take different forms in different businesses, but it's a function called customer success. And the question then becomes like, what is customer success responsible for? And fundamentally, at its most simple form, customer success is going to be the key team responsible focused on keeping and growing that recurring customer base. And now there's a lot more that we can go into this, but if I try to boil it down to the most simple function of customer success, it's this. I try to think about what are the economics, what are the things I can do. Now, the tricky thing about customer success is they're not always the best team to improve those metrics, but oftentimes they're in the best position to be the voice of the customer to talk about that. So I'm going to come back to that. I'll talk about more of that in a minute. But there oftentimes is a big question of like, why do I need to go build this new team? Why do I need to focus? I've got all these other functions in my business. Mark, why do I need to think about, building this customer success function in my business? And fundamentally, it comes down to, for me, these next two slides that I'll show. This first slide, and forgive me if I'm geeking out for a minute, but I think this is really important to understand if you're going to build a long-term successful subscription business. So the first slide here comes from a guy named Ben Murray. He has a website called thesaascfo.com. If you really want to geek out on economics of subscription businesses, or he talks about SaaS. If you're not familiar with SaaS, it's software as a service. It's basically recurring software that's predominantly hosted in the cloud. But his website, he talks a lot about the economics of growing a SaaS business. And if you dig in, you'll have to squint here a little bit to kind of dig in on this slide, but I'll try to explain it very simply in that you've got 5 different parts to each of these bars. So it goes left to right over time. So you've got month 1 on the left side, month 12 over the course of a year on the right side. And if you look at each individual bar, you see the blue, that big blue section, that's the recurring monthly revenue coming into the month. And so that's what we start with. That's the subscription business coming into the month. And then on the top and on the bottom is how we add to and take away from it. Now, for most companies, that little orange sliver at the top, that's the new sales. So that's, my sales team, that's where they're responsible for bringing in every month. If you really squint, you'll see just on top of that, there's a little gray sliver that accounts for upsells, cross sells, existing customers that are buying more from us. And then at the very bottom, if you squint, you start to see the problems. This is the red and the yellow part. These are the customers that leave. They either churn or they downgrade. They were paying us $500, now they're paying us $100. So basically, they're downgrading from us. And the main thing I want to draw your attention to on this is that as a subscription business tends to grow from left to right, the impact of that orange bucket, remember the orange bucket is the new sales. And that's traditionally what most businesses, we laser focus on, that new sales number. But if you're in a subscription business, the impact of that orange bucket, the impact of that new sales number month in, month out actually starts to have less of an impact in the long-term health of the business. And you can even say, like, let's say your sales team has an awesome month. They double quota. Great. So that orange bucket is going to, double in size, and you'll see that'll impact revenue somewhat. But on the flip side, let's say in that same month that our sales team has an awesome month, our retention or our customer success team has a really tough month, and we churn out 5-10% of our business. Well, just immediately like that, we can take in a great sales month and wipe it out completely because we didn't retain our customers. So a lot more we can go into on that, but I want to go into the next slide, which explains another side to this same concept. And this is a concept that comes from a guy named David Skok, S-K-O-K, really well-known software entrepreneur and venture capitalist, writes a blog called forentrepreneurs.com. And he has this article that talks about, the name of the article is Unlocking the Path to Negative Churn. And actually that's where my shirt comes from, and I'll explain it. So in this article, he talks about 4 different businesses. And the 4 different businesses all have really great sales teams. And they basically have sales teams that deliver the same amount of revenue every single month. The difference is in the retention rate of those businesses. So if I look at the bottom of this, so the red line, got a really solid sales team, they're delivering. I've got, good reps, good productivity. They're bringing it in there and bringing it in every month. And we're churning out about 5% of our customers every month. And like any annuity, like any, compound interest, you can see that over the course of about 4 or 5 years, this business grows. Okay. I think this grows to, in this graph, we're saying 2,000. So that could be 2,000, that could be 2 million, that could be 20 million, whatever. But you can see how it grows. The yellow line, better business, same exact sales numbers, little bit better retention. You do see a better result in it. Where this graph really gets interesting, though, is in the purple and the green lines. The purple is exhibiting a phenomenon called it's zero revenue churn. So basically, that doesn't mean that no customers leave, but what it does mean is that any customers that we leave through churn or downsell, we can upsell or cross-sell out of that. So basically, we net out at the end of the month. And just by doing that, just by retaining all of our revenue that we came into the month with, you can see that business is about 2 to 3 times the size of the 5% churn business. But where it gets really interesting is when you see that green line. And that green line is a company that has figured out how to upsell and cross-sell even more in a given month than they lose out of retention and downsell. So they've created this concept called positive growth. And so that's what I'm talking about in my shirt here is they've figured out how a customer that's paying you $100 a month at the beginning of the month, by the end of the month, maybe they're paying you 101, 102. And that is offsetting any business that we lost through churn and downsell. And so when you think about all these software businesses or any subscription businesses that have, skyrocketed to growth in the last, 5-10 years, whether that's Slack or any number of other ones, typically they've figured out this slide here, and we can dig into that a lot more. So, but that's the reason you want to have a good, solid customer success strategy. And so I'll spend the last few minutes here just talking about like how to lay the framework, how to lay the groundwork of building a great customer success team. And it really comes down to starting off with 3 things. I'm going to talk about proactive, not reactive customer management. I'm going to talk about how you monitor and improve customer health and how customer success can be the voice of the customer across the company. You remember a minute ago, I said customer success is responsible for retention and growth, but they might not always be the best team to impact that. This is where this comes in. So let me dig into that. So the first thing is proactive versus reactive. Oftentimes I have this discussion and I talk about building a customer success team, and somebody will tell me, yeah, we have a customer support team. And they're fundamentally as vital and important as customer support role is in a subscription business. It's fundamentally different than customer success. And the way to easily think about it is that customer support is typically your reactive team. They come in every morning and they look at tickets that have been logged by customers, issues that they're having. And we've all had experiences with support teams at one point or another. And these are teams that again, are reactive. They're waiting for issues to happen with customers so that they can solve them. Customer success is fundamentally different because they're proactive. In similar ways to how your sales team is proactive, they're reaching out to customers, they're reaching out to prospects, trying to bring them into your business. Customer success has different ways to focus on how they can be proactive at focusing on driving adoption, retention, and growth. And so one of the ways that customer success does this is by focusing on customer health. And one of the things that you'll see happen is a good customer success team will, back to earlier, they'll understand the attributes and the activities that a customer needs to take in order to be successful in the long run. Then they'll start to figure out, how do we track them and compile them into a health score? And a good customer health score has multiple different parts to it. In the software business, you might track usage, you might track how well are they engaging with my team? You might track things like NPS or other feedback scores, and you try to compile all of this into a customer health score that starts to give you a signal into is this customer trending up or trending down? And then fundamentally what your customer success team is doing is they're focusing on improving that customer health, whether that's through usage, whether that's through something else. And regardless of whether you're a software business or not, this idea of understanding what are the indicators that improve customer health and then trying to figure out what's our playbook for doing that. Fundamentally important to building any customer success team. And with any framework, the last bullet point here, this is something that you should always be periodically reassessing. Maybe every quarter, maybe a couple times a year, you come back and you look at your framework and you say, does this framework actually line up with reality? A lot more we can go into with customer health scores, but that's a good intro for now. The next part here is talking about how to become the voice of the customer. And so the CSMs, I don't know if I explained that term. So CSMs is a customer success manager. So anybody that's in customer success, typically, these are the folks that interact with customers every day. And oftentimes they are in the best position to see your customers' challenges. Now, as I said a minute ago, they're not always in the best position at solving them, because if they see a customer's challenge, that might be a product issue. Or if they have a customer that was missold with bad expectations, maybe that was a sales issue. Or if it turns out we're attracting a lot of the wrong customers to our business in the first place, maybe that's a marketing issue. So it's not necessarily the case that customer success is responsible for solving all those issues, but they are responsible for identifying those issues and then communicating those challenges to the rest of the company and working with the rest of the company on solving those issues so that everybody can work toward better retention, better growth. The last thing that I will focus on here before we go to the Q&A is this idea of an everything department. Now, this was a concept that was written by a friend of mine named Rav Dhaliwal. He's a partner at Crane Ventures in London. And one of the things that he identified, and he was a former customer success leader at Slack and Zendesk, and he's seen tons of really successful customer success teams. And the thing that he started to notice was that there were a lot of customer success teams that started taking on or were given activities and responsibilities. And this happens all the time today. They're given responsibilities that they can't really impact. They can't really do anything with. And so, the real purpose of customer success, as we've been saying, is to keep and grow revenue from existing customers. But there's a ton of companies out there that kind of take any customer activity that nobody else wants, and they tend to give it to customer success. And when that happens, it severely limits the value that your CS team can drive. And so this is something I would greatly challenge you against. I would actually recommend everyone go read the article that Rav published. If you just Google the everything department, you should find it. And if you don't, just put his name, Rav Dhaliwal, behind it, you'll find it. And this is, one of the fundamental kind of like mistakes that I see a lot of customer success teams take on. So again, to try to recap everything we've talked about, I've been focused on, remember we started on, building recurring customers. Whatever industry, whatever business you're in, even if you have a mix of recurring and non-recurring right now, you should always be focused on how do I build more recurring customers? Then once I have those recurring customers, I need to be just laser focused on retention and growth of those customers, because that's how you start to get to that point where you start to see positive growth. You start to see really interesting economics of your business. And then, of course, making sure that when you make that investment to a subscription business, you have a customer success team. And it doesn't always have to be a quote unquote team. Some of it, sometimes it's just a customer success function. Sometimes it's part of your marketing team, but you need to have some dedicated resources in your business that have the right tools to really focus on driving long-term retention, long-term growth. And so again, really appreciate you guys taking a few minutes and listening to me through this. And I think we're going to switch over to the Q&A. Is that right, Kristen?
Yeah, that's right, Mark. That was awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation. I was eating up every word. That was really great.
Cool,
For those of you in the audience who didn't see, I did just post 2 questions just based on the discussion we just have. I would love to hear from you if you faced more stretch risk or switch risk in 2020, and just tell us a little bit more about your industry. I have the chat open. I'd love to hear more. And then secondly, I'm curious to find out what everyone's customer success leading indicator is, right? At Nutshell, we call this product stickiness. For us, it's an adoption score. It's, just looking at, are people sending email, logging activities, things like that. But I'm always really curious to hear from our audience members, just kind of, some answers to those questions. So drop those in the chat.
Okay. I think if you're a leading indicator, you don't know. I think that's one of the things that when we started, talking about this a year or two ago, a lot of companies just didn't know. And so they started to set goals around just, okay, we actually need to figure out what the leading indicator is. And if you're in that bucket, that's my challenge to you.
Yeah, for sure. You got to define it, right? You can't set goals around it if you don't know what that thing is. So yeah, I absolutely love that. So I have the honor of doing a little fireside chat with you, Mark.
Sure.
I'm really excited to speak with you today. You've been in the industry for a long time. I'd love to hear a little bit about what got you into customer success and what keeps you here.
Sure. So you're right in that, the majority of my career has been more in the new business side, running sales, running marketing, and, the various businesses that I've been in, we saw one of the immediate trends that I saw was the difference between, how successful a software business was when they actually had figured out customer success. And some of the businesses that I'd been at, we had points in time where we had not figured out customer success. And we ended up having, really rough retention. And you could almost see, overnight, once we started to focus on customer success and retention, that, the overall growth of that business, while it doesn't happen overnight, one of the challenges with the subscription model is that it's something that compounds over time. But once you kind of get that flywheel working, then it tends to work really well. And then from there, I'd say, one of the other things that kind of got me into customer success itself is that the idea behind once you understand, yes, we need to drive customer success. Once you understand retention and growth is important, the next thing is to figure out what are the tools, what are the, capabilities that somebody needs to actually drive retention and growth. And fundamentally, if you roll back the clock 10 years, there weren't any tools built for CSMs. There weren't any tools that were built to say, this is actually how you take this group of customers. This is how you monitor customer health. This is how you do all these things. And this is how you can actually impact retention over the long haul. And so, starting to see, the different kind of technologies pop up and the different challenges that a lot of customer success teams are facing. That's how I ended up finding ClientSuccess. And, that's our mission. That's our goal, is to help every subscription business figure out how to keep and grow those customers. And so that's something that, we start where we focus a lot in, B2B, SaaS, customer success. But I think the idea behind, a subscription economy applies to just about every other business out there.
For sure. Something you keep mentioning, I really want to make sure that, we're able to communicate this to audience members who might not work in SaaS, but you're talking about the voice of the customer. Are there a few practical ways you can break that down for our audience members who might be wondering what that looks like, in their own businesses, maybe someone who's not working in a SaaS company? What does that look like to advocate for the voice of your customer?
I mean, traditionally, it comes down to just any way. The easiest way I'd say to start is, figuring out how do we compile feedback from customers and then share that with the various, teams in the business. So, the most simple aspect that I see a lot when somebody kind of wants to start with the voice of the customer program, they'll typically start with some type of feedback mechanism, whether that's NPS, Net Promoter Score, or there's a bunch of different versions of feedback data. They'll kind of start there. And I think that's a good place to start. And if you can make sure that you figure out what's the right feedback mechanism for our business, and not just feedback, but how do we take that feedback, share it with the right people, and then make sure that, your leadership team is periodically looking at it, actioning it, and actually doing something with that information. The biggest mistake I see a lot of companies do is they say, oh yeah, we need to start a voice of the customer. Let's get NPS. And we take the score, we put it in our quarterly, board deck, and then don't do anything with it after that. So, I mean, it is fundamentally kind of like a culture of just how do we think about, take the first few steps to start to build a culture where we value and apply customer feedback. So I'm not sure if that helps, but that's kind of my initial thought on that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of if you're a fan of The Office, the suggestion box, like it's like Dusty and the 100%. Amazing. Well, a couple of follow-up questions for you. So what do you think, either a customer success manager or someone working in customer success this year, what is the biggest challenge going to be in 2021, considering the year we're coming off of? Like, what is it that we're facing today that's going to be like the hardest to get through?
So there's still an element of, especially if you're not in software, there's still very much an element of, there's a ton of companies out there that just quote unquote don't get customer success. Like we even did a survey middle of last year where we were looking at software companies, and in those software companies in 2020, only about 2/3, one of the questions that we asked was like, does your CEO actually understand customer success? Do they get it? And 2/3 of them said yes, 1/3 of them said no. And that was in like software subscription businesses. So if you take that and you take that outside of, SaaS and software, I think that number is going to be drastically bigger. So one of the big challenges is just kind of like internal, challenges around getting buy-in to the concept of customer success. I think that fundamentally in a lot of industries, we've started to kind of seen the tide turn. But I still see a lot of, especially early stage companies, say, we've got a product team, we've got a marketing team, we've got a sales team. Those are fundamental aspects of how we run our business. Let's experiment with this customer success thing. We don't know if that'll work. It hasn't, in some cases, graduated yet to a first-class citizen. And that's part of why I do all this, is I think it's that important. It needs to be a first-class citizen. And so that's a big part of it. So I think that is still a fundamental challenge for CS professionals. There's probably 5 other things I could say on that, but that's probably where I would start. Yeah,
that's a really great answer. And I know here at Nutshell, we didn't have a customer success department, and it really took a lot of data logging and tracking numbers, the volume of customers we were losing due to a lack of onboarding process, things like that. It took time to kind of make that argument. So I can definitely empathize with that for sure.
Yeah, like what ends up happening with every startup is you kind of have those traditional roles. And then it gets to a certain size and somebody on the executive team says, man, we're losing some customers. This sucks. They don't even know to build a customer success team. They just go find somebody that's smart and they say, hey, can you go talk to our customers? And that's usually the evolution of a customer success team. But I would love to see that fundamentally shift, because there's a lot of companies, I think, that are especially in their early stages really struggling, because all they're focused on is kind of like traditional product market fit, meaning, can I develop something? Can I build something and get people using it? And they forget there's a key part to product market fit is, can I actually retain and grow those people over the long run? So
100%.
Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Cool. Yeah, that was a great answer. So I have a lot to get through, and I want to make sure we get to some audience questions as well. But just to prepare our audience for having some of the internal dialogue, hopefully following your session, they're bringing this idea back to their teams about turning their businesses into a recurring model. What are some of the objections to changing the tides a little bit and like looking at this as more of a recurring as opposed to repeat business? And what kind of advice would you give them on presenting their ideas?
Yeah, so the fundamental challenge for somebody who is a traditional kind of like one-off business, to get them to transition to a recurring business, especially if it's going to be like a monthly or a quarterly subscription. Like it is a fundamentally different financial model and how you run a business. So when you go talk to your CFO, she's used to, getting these big checks in for these big projects that we've been doing, and she can use that to finance the business for the next period of time. Now, in a subscription business, she doesn't get those big lump sum checks up front. It kind of flips, where she actually has still the same amount of costs, because it's still cost just about the same amount to acquire that customer, but now she's getting paid a little bit over the course of time. And so the main thing that anyone there needs to understand is, if you kind of look at the traditional kind of revenue it's tough to sometimes make the case for that transition. And that's why you really need to come back to earlier in the presentation. I talked about like understanding the unit economics of every individual customer. How much does it cost me to acquire a customer? How long do they stick around? What's that lifetime value of that customer? And really being able to have that discussion in a data-driven way is the way that I think most companies start to finally make that transition. And then being able to show them, the slides like that I had mentioned from the David Scott article of once you actually make this transition, it's going to be an awkward transition early on because you need to kind of figure out how to finance this new business where we have costs up front, but we get paid back over time. Once you start to see how that puppy compounds over the long run, that's where you see people starting to come around. That's where you people are going to say, okay, once I see the compounding effect of this, now if I have any interest in the long-term health of the business, that's what I care about.
100%. Yeah. So everybody, just to recap, we've got to get out our calculators, crunch some numbers, 100%. Cool. Well, I've got two more, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. Haven't checked the chat in a minute, so if you haven't written a question yet, please do. But Mark, our audience is represented by varying team sizes, right? You and I chatted a little bit about this in preparation for today's event. We have representatives from all different, industries, team sizes. Can you offer a few suggestions for small, mid, enterprise teams, what that first step might look like at those different business sizes to developing this customer success function? Like, what does that look like for, a team size of 5? As we're starting to get going with customer success, if, hopefully a lot of people are really excited about the content you're sharing today.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, whoever the responsible party is, they need to first kind of buy into that concept that we just talked about there of like the idea of building a recurring revenue business that's going to compound over time. Like they got to buy into that first. That's got to be the why. And so like that's the first conversations that I'm having. If I'm in a business that doesn't focus on recurring revenue or customer success, like I need that's my rallying cry is to help everybody understand, like, we got to start to focus on building these subscriptions. And it's the long-term health of our business really is, vitally important on that. And so that is traditionally where I would start. Here's where the thing, and I'll caution against the mistake that I see a lot of people make early on, especially people that kind of were given that responsibility that I talked to a minute ago of, we don't really have a customer success team, but we have somebody who says somebody should go talk to our customers. So you kind of have like the customer person. A mistake that I see that person running all the time is when they go talk to the leadership team, to the executive team, or to, the sales team or the product team, they tend to focus on, the customer success metrics, the customer success thought process. In customer success, we talk about things like adoption. We talk about things like renewal. We talk about things like fundamentally, when you have that discussion with whatever audience you're talking to, you got to translate it into what they're talking about. If you're talking to the CFO, you got to talk CFO's language. If you're talking to sales, you got to talk sales language. And that's the mistake that I see a lot of people make early on. So this is part of the challenge with it is that whole idea of like being the voice of the customer across the entire business. I've got to be able to go have intelligent conversations with product. I got to go have intelligent conversations with my executive team with the things that are important to them. And so like, I think it's, important that, not only every CSM understands here's the stuff that I do, but here's the stuff that like all the rest of the business cares about. So, I think, I'm not sure if that kind of 100% answers your question, but like, you got to help everybody understand. Let's get on with the idea of recurring revenue and then kind of the whys, and then we can figure out the hows from there.
You hit the nail on the head. What a great answer. Yeah, you're so right. You got to be able to speak all of the languages, in order to get everybody kind of aligned with the customer. That's ultimately what you want to do is kind of anchor yourself with them, but at the same time, speak in a way that is going to resonate with the different departments on your team. I think you nailed it. Totally agree. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. Do we have a couple minutes for a few audience questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. Thank you, Mark. All right. So the first one is from Akila. He says, what are the best ways to re-engage current customers to uncover new challenges and opportunities?
So that is a great question. Is it Akila? Is that what you said?
Yes.
So here's the two ways I think about that. One is when you think about the best ways to re-engage, there's typically two things that have gone on there. If you have a customer that you're not engaged with, one is they're happy, they're running off, they don't need anything from you, or they've stopped engaging because they don't want anything to do with you. Now, the mistake that I see every CSM, not every CSM, the mistake that I see a lot of people make is they try to re-engage that customer, and they send the same mistake that a lot of salespeople make is I'm just sending a check-in. I'm just checking in. We haven't talked in 3 months, 6 months. I'm just doing a check-in. You really need to laser focus on how is the thing that when I reach out, I need to make sure I'm driving some value.
Yeah.
And so like if they are, let's take the example where they've just stopped engaging because they stopped using your product or stopped engaging with your company. Like you got to have some value that wants to bring them back to the table. Maybe you go back and remind them of, hey, when you purchased this thing 6 months ago, you were trying to accomplish X, Y, and Z goals. Based on what I can see, you haven't accomplished those. Like, is that still important to you? Is that still something that you want to talk about? Try to bring them back to the table. And the other way to think about it, and I think the way you phrased the question, Akila, was more like to re-engage them to think about, additional value. So if you're reaching out with the idea of I'm going to do some type of an upsell or a cross sell, not re-engage somebody who's gone dark on me, same thing goes. I've got to be able to reach out, provide some value to you and say, okay, this call, getting on the call with this person is going to be worth 10, 15, 20 minutes of my time. So that's the thing, is that just kill the check-in, figure out when I reach out, how am I actually going to drive value?
I love that. That's your new t-shirt. Kill the check-in.
Good idea.
I'm obsessed. That's so funny. All right. That was a great question, Akila. Thank you so much. Great answer, Mark. Next one comes from Ian. He says, what are some tips for solo entrepreneurs and micro companies in creating a subscription model in a non-subscription industry? Ian, I would love to know what industry you're in. That would be really interesting. But yeah, tips for solopreneurs and micro companies. How do they get started with creating a subscription model?
So first thing I think actually Warlow in his book, that automatic customer book I talked about, I would go pick that up. But I mean, fundamentally, this comes down to first, like segmenting your customers. What are the customers that are repeat buyers from me, that have bought from me more than once? And if they have bought from me more than once, fundamentally start to go talk to them and try to figure out, why did they buy from me more than once? And try to figure out, is there an offering that I could offer them that would make them, that would entice them to pay me every single month? There's no shortage of, solo entrepreneurs that I could see doing this. Perfect example. I've got a guy that comes to my house twice a year, and he washes all the windows externally and internally, right? And he actually was smart enough to come to me and say, hey, Mark, can you just bill me, can I bill you like $10 a month? And what I can do with that $10 a month is, yes, I will still come twice a year and, do everything that we're talking about. But, if you ever have an issue in between that, like I'll come over and, do a one-off anytime you want. And so he was clever enough to think about, like, what are the other things that and now he gets $10 a month from me. Sure. Whereas he used to get, $100 twice a year. But again, very open to stretching risk, very open to switching risk. Because if I forgot to call him, right, or, whatever reason, it happened infrequently enough to where it just, it would oftentimes, skip my mind, but now I pay the guy $10 a month. So.
100%. Yeah. Ian just shared in the chat, he is in corporate and healthcare photography. So there's definitely something that you could do there. That's a really great. Thank you for sharing, Ian.
Yeah. Like, why would somebody need recurring? Like, do they need new executive headshots? Do they need to do this? It's just like, you pay me this flat rate and you never have to worry about, the one-off cost to go get this thing done. You just pay me, whatever it is a month, and I'll always be there on call for you. Something like that.
Yeah, I love that. Adding that value again to getting their consistent spend month after month.
Yep.
Awesome. So we've got one more question from Chris. Chris says, any advice on reteaching clients or customers on a subscription model, as many existing clients may have objections or questions as an organization makes the shift? Yeah, again, speaking to that kind of awkward switch over, what kind of tips do you have for Chris?
It comes back to, for me, how do you devise the program? How do you devise the offering? If there's not enough value for me to shift from one-off to recurring, I'm not going to do it. And I have seen examples of this. I remember there was an e-commerce business that I bought from very infrequently. And they were trying to offer me a program that, would give me money to a bank, similar to that aesthetics program that I talked about earlier. But fundamentally, it needs to be a compelling enough offering to where, yes, I use that. And the other thing to think about it is, not all of your customers are going to be good fits for the recurring model. And that's why you got to think about segmenting out your customers, looking at your repeat customers, and trying to focus on that segment first. If you try to move everybody overnight, that probably won't work very well.
Yeah.
But let's say I start to segment my customers, and I've got this core bucket of customers that I think I could get to move. Go talk to 10 of them, and start to think about what would be an offering that would look like that they would be willing to pay a recurring subscription for. What are those extra benefits and extra offerings that I would need to provide, and focus there. So don't try to move everybody all at once. Try to focus on a segment and then grow that segment over time.
Great answers. Yeah. So just this is a question out of my book, but is there any kind of business that should not adopt a recurring model? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people in the audience saying oh, that'll never work for me. Does anybody totally remove themselves from this conversation?
It's funny. I think about this, and I was thinking about this the other day, maybe the funeral business, but even the funeral business, there's actually examples I've seen where you pay, a subscription where you basically pay into a bank, and, you can you can defer funeral costs. Here's the one I think: personal injury lawyers. I don't think I should have my personal injury attorney on a subscription, right? Personal injury, that's something I should use if I absolutely need it.
Sure.
But if I'm paying, $100 a month to my personal injury lawyer, then I'm just not looking to get hurt. That's one I wouldn't do. But beyond that, I would love for somebody to challenge and give me some examples on that. I don't know if they're in the chat or on Twitter, but I can't think of great examples of that. Yeah, prepaid legal. Looks like Will got it there. So.
Yeah, there you go. I would love to continue hearing those in the chat. I think that could be really interesting. I'm sure if anybody can.
Ryan was at. Oh yeah, sorry. Ian answered Ryan's question.
Yep. Yeah. If anybody can turn a business into a recurring model, I'm sure it's you, Mark. Okay, and then just to follow up on that, is any industry exempt from needing customer success?
So there definitely might be industries that might be exempt from having quote unquote dedicated customer success managers, like yourself, right? You're a customer success manager in a nutshell, right? I think but there is no business that's trying to build a subscription business that is exempt from somebody focusing on the long-term health and growth of that business. There is nobody at Netflix that has the term customer success manager. But you better believe there's tens of thousands of people at Netflix that look at the algorithms, that look at the trends, that look at what's going on in that business and try to make sure that they continue to get my whatever it is now, $10-15 a month, right? And so short answer is no, there's nobody that I would say is exempt from having a customer success function, mindset, culture. There might be some people that you don't need a customer success manager. I think that's fine. Yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah. Great answers. I'm going to check one more time for any questions in the chat. We're at about a minute, everybody in the audience. So if you do have anything you'd like to challenge Mark with before we let him go, now is our time.
Hitman, I would be willing to bet that, if you were in that line of business, you would love to be on a subscription for a Hitman business. If I was in that line of business.
For sure. All right. Everybody, this has been so much fun. Mark,
Yeah, I love it.
so
It's been
much
awesome.
for being here.
Great group.
Yeah, pleasure kind of picking your brain. So glad you could be with us. And from everybody here on the Boundless crew, like, thank you for spending the afternoon with us. It's been a pleasure.
It's been awesome. Really appreciate it.
For sure.
Thanks for putting this on.
Oh, yeah, you got it. So for everyone watching, please visit ClientSuccess.com to learn more about Mark's work. And then please stick around for more expert sessions on email marketing, sales prospecting, and customer experience as Boundless 2021 continues.